Man, but what's next? Holy Toledo Batman. You know that organization that fights for truth? Like their name is Project Truth. And they go like Facebook, Google, and they find all the stuff. Welcome to the stage, the senior undercover journalist, Project Veritas. Come on down. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Because what this company is doing for the country and for the world, priceless.
Thanks. For those of you wondering why I'm holding a stuffed miniature alpaca in my hand, well, I'll get to that. First, I want to yield 30 seconds of my time to Clive Staples Lewis, who wrote, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience. They may be more likely to go to heaven, yet at the same time likelier to make a hell of earth. This very kindness stings with intolerable insult, to be cured against one's will and cured of states which we may not regard as disease, is to be put on a level of those who have not yet reached the age of reason, or those who never will, to be classed with infants, imbeciles, and domestic animals." Now, speaking of animals, how many of you are familiar with Retracto, the correction alpaca? So we specially deliver this to journalists who lie about us, as is ritual in that industry. Well, I use journalists lightly, all right, with air quotes. This was a creature of Andrew Breitbart, who without him, in my opinion, and first there was Andrew Breitbart, then there was President Donald Trump. And I can tell you, my last memory of him, I last saw him. I was the last actually in the office to see him the night that he died. I left just before he did, and this was 2012, February 20. It was the night before March 1st. All right, I'm working on a story, and I'm downstairs, and Andrew comes in about 2:00. Full of energy, stomping around. I hate these people. Because at the time, Project Veritas was being lied about by Current TV, which was Al Gore's very successful network. That was kind of it's where all the MSNBC anchors went after they made an ass of themselves. It was sort of like the ghetto of ex-MSNBC. Anyway, so David Schuster lied about us, all right? And so James O'Keefe was preparing to sue them the next day, to sue Al Gore, Keith Olbermann, and David Schuster for lying about us. So at the time, I was working for Andrew Breitbart, and I was working on a story. Andrew goes upstairs, And he's like, Christian, get up here. So I go upstairs, and I figure he wants to talk about, the story that I'm writing about the Veritas lawsuit. He says, and he's on his computer, and he's got Twitter up, and I say, okay, so I figure you want to talk about this story about James's lawsuit. So I'm thinking that I should go at it from this angle. He's like, no. What do you think of this tweet? And there's a tweet that Andrew opened up his Twitter, and it was this was his zen, was all the haters coming at him. He was like, bring it on. And he's like, what do you think of this tweet that I'm about to tweet back to this hater? And I don't know, some random person. And I said, oh, it's very funny. He's like, what, you don't like it? I'm like, no, it's great. He's like, okay, great. And then I'm like, okay, so I'll just go back downstairs. Andrew understood the narrative. He understood the power of narrative, the fact, and he was so committed to the truth, to correcting the record, and not letting a single lie, a single mainstream media lie get lost in a whitewash. And he would make sure I remember Glenn Beck was speaking, and there's these haters outside with signs calling him a racist. Andrew was not out there, was not inside schmoozing with Glenn Beck. He was outside. He said, I'm going to go sign by sign and ask all of you how he's a racist. That's how committed. It didn't matter where the lie was or who was saying it. He would scour the earth to correct the record and get in the face of the people that were lying. Speaking of applause, can we, by the way, have one more round of applause for George Papadopoulos? And by the way, if you have not read his book, Deep State Target, I grew up loving crime fiction and, noir films and James Bond movies. This is the most spine-tingling thriller that you'll probably read this decade. Now, what grabbed me about his story especially is, and coming from it as a journalist, who my formal training is in screenwriting and film production. That is an amazing story. It's setting aside even the politics and all that and the morality. That's just an amazing story. As a journalist, why would you not want that story? Why would you not want to tell the truth about the story of Crossfire Hurricane? It's an amazing story. The version that the Democrat media complex invented is kind of boring. It's trite. It's first-year film school material. It's also crap. It's also and when you were listening to George earlier, did you think about the lengths that these people went to just to create a narrative for you guys? The lengths that they went to. It was not like they were existentially afraid of him because he was, a physical threat. No. That was so that they could storyboard. Is it hard to take me seriously with it when I'm holding? These are some of the links that we found in our undercover investigations, Project Veritas, that they were willing to go to stagecraft a narrative. So in 2016, I was in Wisconsin. I was undercover for Project Veritas. If you've read James's book, I'm Steve Packard. Yeah. So I did more campaigning for Hillary Clinton in Wisconsin than Hillary Clinton. I was out in the freezing cold. This was the week before the Wisconsin primary, all right? And I'm knocking on doors, I'm getting people to the polls for the primary election. just so I could earn the trust of those Chicago groups that had come out of Chicago and were organizing Wisconsin politics for the last 20 years. In coordination with the unions, with the AFL-CIO, the SEIU. The SEIU, they invited me to their election watching party, the primary election. And I went there and it was a bar in Milwaukee, and the first guy I see is Scott Fogle. Now Scott Fogle and I get to talking. Now in order to expose corruption undercover, you have to appeal, you have to gain, in order to gain their trust, you have to self-incriminate. You have to tell them a secret about yourself and the criminal stuff you're up to, so that they will feel comfortable. So this was my pitch. I said that I'm a consultant and I have a client who hates voter ID, thinks it's racist, and he's come up, and he's a wealthy philanthropist, and he's come up with a scheme of busing people. This is my story I invented to tell Scott Fogle, okay? Busing people to polls, and he'll create a shell company and issue employer-issued IDs that they can show at the polls, and that way, I made the philosophical case for it, because if the Republicans are going to change the rules, then as long as we play by them, we're gonna lose. He's like, yes, that's brilliant. But here's how you get away with it. You wanna blow it up to a more massive scale. Do it in Michigan. It's harder to trace. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. So that way it's harder to trace. Don't use buses, and you don't want to use rental cars because they don't have Wisconsin license plates. You want to use used auction cars. So he's giving me all this advice on how to tell my client to get away with, and this is all on tape. He had no idea who, or wherever my hidden camera was. He had no idea that on the other side of that was 50 million people. 6 months from then. So here he is, and by the way, just so you understand, he worked for Bob Kramer. This is what we would, spoiler alert. So he says, I'll get to that in a sec. So he says, this is how you get away with it, and by the way, I know who your client is who came up with this. I'm like, really? And I'm thinking, I just invented him in my head that morning. So I'm like, oh, well, who do you think my client is? He goes, well, Bob Kramer comes up with a lot of this stuff. Bob Kramer, look at Bob Kramer at the time. He ran Democracy Partners. He was the advisor to the Hillary Clinton 2016 campaign. He is the husband of Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. He was in that whole Chicago organizing, if you read Stanley Kurtz's Radical in Chief about where Obama came from in the 1970s in Chicago, Bob Kramer's all over it. Now, so I said, well, what kind of stuff does Bob Kramer come up with? And he's like, okay, well, one thing we do. Do you remember that guy who was beat up at a Trump rally back in, whenever? And I'm like, oh, yeah. That was us, we trained him. They were hiring people, training people to go into Trump rallies and incite violence. And he said, oh, you have to stagecraft it, see? You have people, you plant other people around the crowd, so that way, when it happens, there's a wave reaction, the cameras pick it up and everything. And, the cameras can't ignore it because everyone's reacting to this one thing. Next thing we had to find out was, okay, is this true? So we had to cast someone. I called up Scott Fogle afterwards and I said, Scott, I have to give you, thank you so much for all that advice you gave me. Now I'm the big man on campus at my consulting firm, and our client wants to meet you. In fact, he wants to meet Bob Kramer. Can you make an introduction? He says, yeah, totally. So now I got to cast a guy. We had Dan Santini, one of my friends from Breitbart at the time. We cast him to play the wealthy, eccentric philanthropist. Scott Fogle brokers a meeting between him and Bob Kramer, and says, okay, yes, I'm very interested in your plans. Tell me everything. Show me, because I'm interested in giving you a large sum of money. And just to keep their mouth watering, We sent him bottles of wine. We sent him, you know, over the course of the 6-month friendship, we wired him $20,000 just to convince, you know. We need to find out, did Hillary Clinton know about this? Okay. So what if this wealthy philanthropist, Charles Roth, what if he has a niece who is looking for internships because she wants to get involved in the election? Okay. So our Charles Roth says, hey, Bob, by the way, it's summertime and my niece wants to get involved in politics. She's off for the summer. He's like, oh, sure, she can come, you know, intern for me. She is now, our Allison Moss is now inside Bob Kramer's office, inside where they're having the conference calls, and they're saying, oh yeah, well we nixed that Donald Duck thing because Hillary did, no, we did the Donald Duck thing because Hillary liked it. And so we proved that Hillary knew about this. We released the tapes. We had actually given the, negotiated an embargo with Sarah Carter and John Solomon. They were gonna break this for St. Clair. And they were so excited to do so. The day of the release, Sinclair pulls the plug and it says, we can't do it because what if Hillary Clinton wins? She could revoke our FCC license. So we had to release it on our own. Well, through Joel Pollack at Breitbart. Now here's what happened. Donald Trump brings it up in the third debate. Hillary Clinton shuts down a news conference when asked about it. The New York Times, twice on opening week, puts it on their front page. It was a story you could not ignore. Now, I'm told by my sources in Wisconsin that because we released it, that videotape, election day, the town was dead. It was like nothing they had seen in 25, 30 years. No buses coming out of Chicago. The entire Bob Kramer operation, the Chicago machine, thrown out the state. And what happened? Wisconsin goes red for the first time in a generation. I'd like to believe that video was partially to do. Now, here's why we need your help. Because I just want to tell that story so you understand what you already know, the impact that the power of videotape can make. You see what these, and by the way, if you read George's book, you have this one scene, Alexander Downer, all right, and he's holding his phone to George, like pretending to be on his, so I hear that the Russians have dirt on Hillary, Bob, George, and holding it, like filming him with his phone. I can tell you, if that were one of our guys, that would have been his last day in the field. Okay? If that's the deep state, I think we have a chance to do some real damage, right? Oh, by the way, who wants the hat? Who wants the alpaca? Okay. Now. No. What do you take me for? This is not a poll. All right. So. All right. So here's. Oh, let me tell you one more story. Okay. Google 2018. We had a whistleblower come to us from inside Google, okay, with documents telling us about machine learning fairness. Okay, what's machine learning fairness? When you Google something and the search results are manipulated to look a certain way. Anyway, we wanted to confirm this and find out if it's political, if it's being used for political ends. So who's in charge of, I Google it, who's in charge of machine learning fairness? Jen Janai. Okay, how do we meet Jen Janai? She's in San Francisco. All right, where does she eat? Her Instagram, she checked into this cantina. Okay, great. We came, and this is public knowledge. I don't reveal sources and methods unless they're already revealed. So we create a charity, all right, a charity. Reach out to her. We say, Ms. Janai, you're a very successful, inspiring woman in tech. We want to what we're doing is we're pairing mentors with young girls of color who have been pushed out, by the tech boom into the exurbs, and encouraging young girls to get involved in tech. Because, so we want you to mentor a young girl for a half hour a month. She's like, oh, this is lovely. She's from Ireland. So we say, okay, great. Well, let's schedule a meeting. So we schedule a meeting. I meet with her in a canteen in San Francisco. And I say, okay, look, what are we doing? What are we doing about this next election? Because, and she assured, oh, no. We are working overtime to make sure that we don't have a repeat of 2016, that we avoid a Trump situation. A week later, we release the tape, all right, and we have Donald, by the way, and Ted Cruz is right in front of Google executives, reading the transcript of my dinner with Jen Janai, and saying, what do you have to say about that? They had nothing to say about it. YouTube yanked the video, pulled the video on opening day. But by that time, so, Google banned the video, exposing Google. All right. By the time they did that, Donald Trump Jr. had already tweeted the embed version of the video. And that ended up being our most watched video at the time. And we couldn't have done it without the whistleblower who came to us. So here's my pitch, all right? We need whistleblowers. Don't underestimate yourselves. Do you remember the game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon? Everyone has 6 degrees of separation between someone they know and someone they know who's on the inside, who might wear a camera and expose what's going on. Because look, if people are so brainwashed, they're only going to listen to the anointed on CNN and MSNBC. They won't listen if it's coming from one of the violent Trump supporters. Okay, fine. Let's find out from the actual bad guys. Let's get the bad guys on tape bragging about what they get away with. Take out your phones, if you wouldn't mind. Take out your phones, all right? Go to projectveritas.com/brave, okay? And tips, too. Open your Rolodexes. Go on social media. Find out who you know, who knows someone, who knows someone, who knows someone, who works, at the border, works in big tech over in Austin, and then give them that link, or send them to me, okay? And let's do something. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Boom! Give it up! Come on! Great job. Phenomenal. Come on, you guys. Project Veritas, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Amazing. It takes guts to do what they do, no? Shh. So, who has guts? Let me see some hands. Come on. Who's got guts? All 4 of you are going to be famous. Wow. You're screwed. It's over.